Hello again, and I've got another project for you, and it involves this little creature here. Let me tell you about this little fella.
My older daughter was 3.5 when her sister was born. And this is what she and I made together to give to the new baby that was coming to our house. So this is now almost 26 years old. You can see that the 3.5-year-old Hallie did the face with probably a fabric marker or maybe just a Sharpie. I helped her tie the bow, but she picked out the fabric for the bear. She picked out the thing.
And these days, many people are having their sewing machines out. So besides just sewing some masks for your family or your neighbors, you could work together to make a little stuffy for your child. Most of the steps can be handled by an older sibling, but many of the steps can be done by a preschooler as well. And so I'm going to walk you through every single step until you end up with a creature that looks like this, and very soft and cuddly and personalized too. Okay, here we go. You're going to need to cut a 9 by 9 inch square of fabric. Besides this, you'll need needle and thread or sewing machine, and maybe some ribbon, some stuffing, and that's about it. Once I measured, I used an ink pen just to draw the stripes and then cut along the stripes that I made on the fabric. Then I folded my fabric in half. And so here is the basic shape of your stuffy. Very simple. So one side of my stuffy is done already because I've used a folded edge. I'll need to sew the other side.
All right, now you have your square and you folded it in half. You're going to be stitching along one side, and you got to leave a little room so you can turn it behind. But so I've made these little markers to show how you're going to stitch all the way, almost all the way to the top. And then my little stuffy is going to be a cat. So do you see how I'm showing you how to make the pointy ears and then like the forehead and then the other pointy ears. This is the fold side, okay? That's just less stitching you have to do. And this side is completely open because that's where you're going to put the stuffy in, the stuffing in, the stuffy. All right? Okay, so the next part you can either do on the machine, and I have a nice trusty antique machine here, or you can sew it by hand. And I'll show you how to do a really simple running stitch that you can try with a real needle and thread. But if you do have your machine out, because I know a lot of people have their machines out now making masks, and we've been making masks too. Where's my mask to show you? Here's mine, okay, with the pleats and everything. And this part goes over the ears. Two sides so you can tell which side you wear. Then it goes in the wash, and then you could decide to wear a different side on another day. Anyway, so I'm going to get my machine out, and I'm going to sew from here all the way up almost to the top. And then, like I said before, I'm going to shape the ears. Because this is going to be a kitty cat. You could make rounded ears if you were going to make a teddy bear. So when I get to this point on my sewing machine, I'm going to stop the sewing machine with the needle in the hole, lift up the presser foot, and then just pivot my whole fabric around. Let's see if I can show you how to do that as I go. And then the same thing, here is not quite a dramatic turn, so you might not, it might be just an easy manipulation of the fabric and go to here and then to here. Okay, and then basically your stuffy is done. Okay, so right now I want you to either go sew by hand. If you are doing the running stitch, put a little extra stitch right when you turn the top of the ear and when you turn for the forehead. Okay, that'll just make it a little stronger.
Don't worry, I'm going to show you how to do a running stitch in just a second.
Okay. All right, meet me back here once you've got your stitching done. Okay, first I want to show you how to do a running stitch. This is the simplest stitch that you can do. Take your needle. I picked a really big one and some very dark thread so you could see it better. Now you can either put a knot in the end like that. Oh, my mom used to do that in one fell swoop. Or this is the way I always do it. I just start with a couple of stitches and stitch a tiny stitch and then stitch in that same place, and that effectively is your knot. Okay, now a running stitch, it enables you to go really fast and make several stitches at a time. So you basically poke through and then poke back, poke through and poke back, poke through and poke back, like that. And once you've got 4 or 5 stitches maybe, and make sure they've gone through both layers, then you just pull them all okay, so you can see all the stitches, and it looks even nicer on this side. And if you open it up, notice I'm using the wrong side of the fabric. The nice side of the fabric should be on the inside, and it works perfectly well for what you need to do. Now occasionally, if you did the running stitch all the way around, all it would take is one break of the thread and your whole thing would come apart. So what I do usually is once I finish my run, I go back and go back in the same hole. So that kind of makes its own knot right there. And then I'm ready to run again. Back and forth, back and forth. It's nice if the stitches are even, but I wouldn't worry too much. And there we go. You can see how fast it is. I've already done 2 inches rather than like a back stitch or a regular thing. So it's almost not quite as fast as sewing on the machine, but it goes very quickly. Okay, so that's the running stitch. And when you're done, again, instead of tying a knot, you would just simply go back and forth several times, right in kind of in the same stitch. And that is that. Okay? So that's how you do the running stitch. All right, here I am on my machine. It's a really nice antique that I found in my attic. Belonged to my great Aunt Helen, and she bought it around 1950. You can see here I made a little extra strength here at the tip of the cat's ear. I went back and forth a little where the forehead starts, came across, and here I am about to make the last turn for the tip of the ear. See how I left the needle in place while I did the pivot? Okay, that just helps keep things lined up. So now I'm ready to make that last turn and put the presser foot down and go all the way to the other ear. And I've got this funky little back and forth thing the way they did it before. So now I go backwards and then forwards, and I should be done. Okay, lift the presser foot, pull it out, snip the threads, and you can see there's the shaping for the cat's ear. All right, here we are back on the board, and you can see how I've angled this here and angled that there. All this stuff on the other side of the, this is the inside, remember. So that's, we don't even need, that can look as messy as you like. But when we turn it inside out, to make the ears really pop out, we're going to have to snip a little on this wrong side so that the ears will pop, okay? Otherwise, they get sort of tangled with all this waste material. This helps it turn, okay? So what I did is I make two little slits that sort of come in towards the corners, but not quite all the way. It's going to stretch a little. So now we have the body of our Stuffie, our little kitty. So the next thing we're going to do
is turn him right side out.
and see what he looks like. He looks cool. I love this fabric. It looks kind of like the planet Jupiter. Now you can see, where are the ears? Oh no, where are the ears? But they're in here, and we might need some help, maybe with the tip of a scissors to poke, or a chopstick or something to pop out the corners. That's why those little slits I just made were so important. They help those ears come out. Okay, now we can tell it's a kitty cat. Okay, so now you can get a little creative, and you could pick maybe a couple of buttons. Let's see, I got my button box. You know I love my button box. Here's two that match. We could give them some eyes. Or we can make something fancy. Ooh, those would be fancy eyes. But remember, if you are making it for young children, you need to make sure those buttons are super secure. Sew them on really well. Oh, those don't match. Anyway, you can see what, oh, I like that one. You can see what you have for eyeballs. And I'll just go with classic, I think. Those can go. You can even give them a little button nose. Let's see if I have a little pink button. Oh, yes, that could be a little button nose for the kitty cat. Okay, so I think before you stuff him, you should probably figure out, you could even just use a Sharpie. I have a Sharpie here. If your fabric was light, the Sharpie would work really well. And just have your kid draw the face on. Okay, so a lot of that running stitch, it might be very challenging for a preschooler, but hand over hand, you could do it. They are sharp, those needles. If you're a big brother of a preschooler, a big sister of a preschooler, I think you could probably manage this whole thing. But the kid can certainly help you pick out the fabric, pick out the buttons, maybe do a few token stitches, and help you stuff your thing. Now, if you don't have stuffing at your house, my mom used to always use old stockings to stuff her things. A lot of our things that she made were stuffed with old pantyhose. The last two steps, I'll give you a sneak preview. After you have the stuffing in, you're going to take these raw edges at the bottom, turn them in, and here you can either, even though there's stuffing there, you can sort of squish the stuffing and sew that right on your machine, like we did with the one my daughter made. Where'd it go? So you can see we did the machine here, but you could certainly whip stitch it with needle and thread there. And to make it look a little more cat-like, the last thing we do is give him the bow. Okay, so find some ribbon, or even a rubber band would do, to bring the cat's thing out like that. All right, so I'm going to spend some time sewing on my button really securely and my little kitty's nose, and I'll meet you back here when it's time to stuff. Now, remember, when you're sewing on the button, only sew it on the front, not the back, because we got to get the stuffing in there, okay? Meet you back here in a little bit. All right, so I'm sewing on this button. I happen to find these two matching buttons that kind of have those little slits like cat's eyes. So I go in and out, in and out. I got my hand in the whole thing, almost like a puppet, just to make sure I don't sew accidentally in the other side. So I got my button nice and sturdy. It's not going to come off anytime soon. And again, instead of a knot, I just sew into the same hole several times. And I can snip that and start to sew my other cat's eye right over here, I think. Okay, my little kitty's coming together. We're ready to go find some stuffing. All right, we're ready to stuff. I am very lucky or unlucky to have a dog who loves to take apart stuffed animals. So if I were going to make this for my kid, I would use fresh stuffing. But as this is for demo purposes, I'm just going to use the stuffing that my dog took out of her toy duck. Okay, so I'm using my fingers to push the stuffing into those cute little ears and face, and we're going to fill it all the way up. While you're going to look for stuffing, why don't you and your child go find something that you can use for the little collar. Some nice ribbon or cord or lace, and I'll meet you back here. All right, I'm back. I found lots more stuffing that the dog hasn't even ripped out of some animal, and I found some other cool stuff too. Look at this nice braid. Now, if I were going to do this, I would probably, instead of tying it, I would probably stitch it in the back, but that looks super classy. Maybe my thing doesn't need to be quite so classy. I found some simple ribbon. That would look nice just tied in a knot. I found some rickrack. That's cool. I love rickrack. I also found, ooh, this is very nice. Classy lace. Again, it's only a tiny bit, so I could stitch that on. Kind of goes with the color scheme. I also found a couple of bows. I don't know what you got at your house, but you could even put a little bow up there. And some antique lace. That might look nice once I iron it. Anyway, so you can think about that for a while we stuff the rest of our kitty. Once we close off the bottom, we can't really add any more stuffing, so make sure you got plenty in there. You can sort of pinch it together, maybe pin it like that. This kitty is not going to have any legs, in case you haven't noticed. And then you can take your needle and thread and just simply across the bottom. Or, like we did in this one, we sort of pinched it together. And sometimes if the stuffing looks a little lumpy, you can sort of massage it in place. But I think we are ready for the last step. If you're being very ambitious, you could make a couple of dangly legs, just long, thin tubes, and stitch them on the bottom. You could make one tube, stuff it, and make that for the tail. But I'm going to keep mine as simple as possible, because that way you get to play with it sooner. And I think what I'm going to do is the whip stitch method. And just sort of hold this tight. I have a pin here that'll help keep this closed. And then I'll get my needle and thread. Oh, my real kitty is talking to me. What do you think? Peter Quince, you want to come see? We'll get his opinion on it in a minute. Okay, so find a needle and thread and we'll go off the bottom and meet you back here for the collar. I mentioned a whip stitch. Whip stitch is different than a running stitch, so I might as well show you how to do that too. So a whip stitch, I'm coming over a little, and what I should see as I come over is I should see a diagonal. You see how that? Get this little guy out of the way. See how I get that? And I bring it all around and come back on the other side. So instead of going in and out like my running stitch, I'm always coming in on the same side. Now if I were being very careful, I would probably choose a different colored thread. Okay, you see how that's like a diagonal? That's called a whip stitch. And I'm always coming in on the same direction. Remember, our running stitch, we went like this, but the whip stitch, I'm always coming in around. And we're almost done. I think your 5-year-old could manage something like this. Maybe not a 3-year-old. Okay, snip. All right, now we're gonna give this guy a big massage. Big massage to sort of settle all that foam in. And now's the time for whatever you decided. There. So there's one. Like that. Joop. Joop. And there's your kitty. He stands up pretty well next to the one we made all those years ago. And again, make sure those buttons are nice and tight if you're going to give it to a little kid. And give him a name. Okay? I think this one's going to be Jupiter, but he's got swirls like the big red spot. And it kind of rhymes with my dog's name, which is Juniper. Juniper and Jupiter. Let's hope that Juniper doesn't grab hold of Jupiter and tear her apart just like she does all her other toys. All right. We're done. That was easy, right?
Have fun sewing. Bye.